it's difficult to have training when there's no one there to train. So that's really why God called me out and said, "You've done a great job there. Now go teach other places as a consultant." And
welcome to CV Ministries Church Security Through Prevention podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Blevins. Terry Berringer is a nurse by profession, and he has used that experience as well as different areas that he has served at his church to start church emergency consulting in the Pennsylvania area. Terry brings a bit of unique perspective that you should be able to get some ideas about how your teams are serving at your church. I just want to take a moment to let you know how much I appreciate the feedback that I get each week and to see how the podcast has grown in just under a year that we've had it going. The podcast has been liked, shared, and subscribed to by many, and I want to encourage you to continue to like, share, and subscribe as we get closer to closing out our first year with doing this weekly podcast. I also want to encourage you to please click on the Google review link or just go out to Google and leave us a review for CV Ministries. You may not realize how important that really is to churches around the country that are looking to us as a resource as they continue to go forward in growing their church and their ministries. Let's hear from Terry and his perspective on serving in your church. Terry, welcome to the Church Security Through Prevention podcast.
thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, this is great. You actually responded to nearly every podcast I put it out there that because I want subjects to be relevant. I want the guests to be relevant to to churches and to ministries as a whole. And I always put out there in the podcast that I'm always open to suggestions, and you answered that and said, "Why not you?" And that was awesome. And it's actually the topic is very similar to what I feel is important, what I call when I do my seminars as the total team concept, that security isn't just the individuals that have been called to stand on the wall while ministry happens. It's got to be all the ministries within the church working together for the security of the church, and to be trained in a variety of different ways, medically, de-escalation, because you never, your usher might be the first person that has to de-escalate something until we can help support him, or a greeter or anything along those lines. And with your experience, as you'll describe here, that you've taken that, God's kind of just led you into different directions in your experience and kept adding more and more to your plate, to where it really is that total team concept that you really reach out to churches about on that. So I won't even ruin it by telling the acronym of it because it is funny. But but tell us a little bit about how all this came together for you.
Well, many years ago, I think just before 9/11, actually, I was tasked at the church we belonged to in volunteering at the time. We were those wonderful people that came in and set up 7,000 chairs in the worship center every Sunday morning. And then after church, 7,000 chairs went back in the closet. And during that time, somebody actually smashed their finger on a chair. And they came running up to me and said, "Terry, you're a nurse. Can you help them?" I said, "Sure." And at that point, I realized the church at the time having 7,000 people, I'm sorry, I apologize, 700 chairs. Wow, 7,000 would be a lot more. Anyways, 700 chairs we were setting up. And I thought a church with 700 people should have a medical team of some sort. And I looked around and they didn't. So I tasked another nurse that I knew was there, and we developed a medical team. Now, they did have a little first aid kit, and it consisted of a couple 4x4s, an ace bandage that looked like it had been used several times and rewrapped, and a bottle of meat tenderizer. Any clue what the meat tenderizer was for?
No idea. But
Okay.
I often call these boo-boo kits when I go and do I do an assessment at a church. Threat assessment. I go through their medical kits, and that's about all that's in them. But no, what about the the meat tenderizer?
That's one of the, yeah. One of the interesting things I do when I do develop medical teams at churches, I do a full out trauma box, a trauma kit, and I do a boo boo box, a boo boo kit. But the meat tenderizer, in case there's anybody listening who is a little older, it was an old wives' tale for bee stings. They would moisten the meat tenderizer and cause it and make it into a little paste and put it on the bee sting, and it actually does work. It's an old wives' tale that actually does work. Anyways, so I saw this old tackle box with a mishmash of things, and I thought, you know what, I could do a better job getting that together. And I really felt called, and God said, you know what, do it. So I went and got supplies, talked to a couple of people who donated either supplies or funding for supplies, and developed a great medical team that at any time during service, there were 2 people on call on radio. At the very beginning, they were little GMRS, little Radio Shack radios. And at that point, they would be toned out on those radios and respond to the nursery where their medical equipment was. And then they would take care of the medical call. And the team got a little bit busier. The more people realized they were there, we found, the older woman who had shortness of breath would call. The person who had blood sugar issues would call. The nursery was famous for calling for, boy versus wall. As you well know, wall wins every time. And those kind of things. So I started the medical team. And then shortly thereafter, I was tasked to start a security team. The security team took off running as well. And they were separate teams. A lot of people develop safety teams, and I'm going to kind of go against the system on this one and say you should have distinguished security teams and distinguished medical teams, as well as a distinguished parking team. And I'll get into that in a moment why. So the medical team came about first, the security team came about second, and then I was asked to start a parking team. At that point in time, I said, guys, I'm spending 50 hours a week at this church. I need to do something. And they said, you're absolutely right. And they put me on staff. So I became the security, medical, and parking. And that acronym you mentioned earlier is SPAM, SPAM. I became the SPAM director. And it is a great acronym to lump all the teams together. And at that point, we then also developed a parking shuttle that was like a glorified golf cart that went around the parking lot and picked up people in the far ends of the parking lot. We had off-site parking because we grew to a Sunday morning gathering of just over 5,000 people. And at that point, there was off-site parking. So the parking shuttle was a van that had the logo, the church logo on it. It would go to off-site parking and pick up people. So I became the parking, security parking, and medical and people mover shuttle. And then I developed something that more churches I think need to develop, which I'd love to get into as well, an umbrella team. Now, an umbrella team sounds silly, but there are times where it is just pouring down rain. And the little old lady who was running late and just jumped in her car, and it wasn't raining when she left, but it's raining now, and she has to go from the back of the parking lot into the front. And it's great to be able to minister to those people, to be able to help them. I have a great story of a young lady who was coming in, and as I held the umbrella for her, I was bringing her in because I served on these teams. Even as the director of all these teams, I would go out and routinely serve on the medical team and serve on the security team. And I was serving on the umbrella team one day, and this young lady said to me, she started crying as I was helping her into the parking lot, into the service. And I said, ma'am, why are you crying? She says, you don't understand. You're not a young lady. And I said, well, touche. I'm not young and I'm not a lady. So why is it that is so important? And she said, because as a young single lady, when I go into church, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, who is watching me? Who is looking at me and seeing how my appearance is? She said, if I walked in there after it raining so bad, I would be looking like a totally drenched poodle, and no single man would look at me. And I would be so concerned about my appearance, which I know you shouldn't be in church, but that's how, as humans we are. And she said, all I would hear from the pulpit would be Charlie Brown's teacher. And if you're old enough to remember the wah, 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 Charlie Brown's teacher. And she said, you not only saved me from the appearance of, and the feeling of appearing very poorly, but you also allowed me to hear the message of God being preached, because I wouldn't have been able to listen and hear anything and pay attention, knowing that I was soaking wet. So it's something as simple as carrying and helping a woman in from the back parking lot with an umbrella can help God's kingdom. And that's cool. The simple little things that we can do, it's just amazing. And so that's how all the teams join together. And when the teams are running, there's an old adage, if your team's running perfectly, it's a perfect day, kind of a thing. And when the teams run right, everything's great. And when they do run perfectly, I use the term, which it has a very bad connotation to it nowadays in the Christian group, holistic. Because nowadays, when you think of holistic, you think of somebody trying to align your chakras and putting hot rocks on different parts of your body. That's not what I'm talking about, holistic. I'm talking about the teams working together as a team, as a unit. And it's absolutely amazing when it works right. And you can see God both working in the volunteers. You can see God working in the people that you're caring for. And you can just see the glory of God in the ministry. So that is, in a short run, why I started developing spam teams, and we can get into why we think we should have separate teams whenever.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm sure you would agree. I mean, it's got to be flexible, because not all churches are going to have a parking team. Not all churches are going to, we carry umbrellas. Our church has a whole stack of them in our ushers room for that rare day that we see rain in Colorado. We get what, 330 some days of sunshine a year. So I mean, it's pretty rare that we get rain. But you're absolutely right. It's a customer service thing, and even from a security, that total team concept aspect. I did a podcast recently, and we were just talking about that the security team needs to be that also out there, since primarily they should be outside, that they should be greeting, that they should be observing people that might be lost, to go offer assistance, take them where they need to go, wherever that case is. And having those umbrellas is definitely can be an aspect of that for many.
Carl Chin, who is truly one of my heroes, and I know you know him personally, and please tell him Terry said hi. I met him back in 2014 NOCCSM, which I still cannot pronounce as a word, conference there at where was it? At New Life.
New Life Church, yeah.
Jeff Cole there, Chuck Chadwick, and like I said, Carl Chin signed my book, Evil in the Sanctuary, Evil Takes the Sanctuary, and I cherish that. I respect that man and look up to him so much. But he quotes in his book that 74.6% of incidents occur outside of the church front doors.
Right.
And that's your perimeter. That's your parking team, and your security guys walking the parking team are just so critical. If you can stop it before it gets in the door, you've got it beat, or at least should have it beat.
Yeah, you don't want to engage somebody once they're inside. Then, that just puts everybody at risk. Then then you really want a medical team around if that's the case, because then it turns into a trauma situation. Yes. If I can identify and address, and this is why it's important not just to observe, but to go engage with individuals so that you truly know what's going on. Why are they there? Are they truly lost? Are they, or are they there for some other reason that maybe with the right questions you can identify, and they might just leave.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But the great thing about that is there are people who would like to serve on the medical team. Some older ladies who are retired nurses, even some younger men and women who work in the nursing field, but they don't want to be chasing down somebody who that maybe stole something out of the coat rack or so. They don't want to be involved in that. They want to help people with using their medical skills. So at that point in time, it's great to have a medical team separate from security, because there's also a lot of guys that work security. As soon as they see blood or MSS or anything like that, or any body fluids, they freak out. So there's a lot of people on the security team that really don't want anything to do with the medical aspect. So that's always, it's a nice separation at that point. But
Now,
like I
do
said, I'm not knocking the concept of safety team. It's just I really strongly believe in the separation of the teams.
so in that then is the security team trained in any medical response?
There is basic first aid, especially for trauma as far as gunshot wounds and those kind of things, because those are the situations that if it does hit the fan, the security team is going to be on their own because the medical team's not going to be there until a little bit later on. But for the most part, the security team is it's great because we refer to the security team a lot of times as gophers. If there's a medical call, the security team are the ones who go and grab the medical bag and we'll go back and get the oxygen and the Dynamap for vitals and the clipboard for paperwork and all those things. So it's the other aspect of that is if there is a situation that happens in inside the building, whether it be in a hallway, you always have to have security there to, for the lack of better terms, direct traffic. Get people to give them space and areas to work, and to keep privacy as well, especially if there's going to be any type of treatment that involved right there. So it's nice to have them there. We always set up to point where you deal with your local EMS and you distinguish what door they're going to come in, and they respond automatically to that door. Now, if there is a situation other than that, it's nice to have them have a nice layout of the building and know a knowledge of the building. One thing I always refer to people is if your church does have a cafe, have a notice put up on the bulletin board at the local fire department and the local EMS and the local police department that if you come to our church at any time with in uniform, you will be given free refreshments, coffee, donuts, tea, whatever you want. And that way you actually have your first responders in your building, not just during services, but anytime that the cafe is open, because it's always nice to know if the most places, responsible place to have the most, how do I want to phrase this? The most likely place to have a fire would be the kitchen. So wouldn't it be nice to have the fire department know where the kitchen is? The most possibility of having a situation that's going to be involving the police department is either in the worship center with a protester or something like that, or the children's area with the child custody issue. And those two things, we train the security team on both the escalation on those areas, but also we want to have the police department know where the nursery is. We don't want to have somebody trying to point to them and drag them to the nursery. They should know where the nursery is and what entrance that is in advance. So there's a lot of pre-planning as well that is involved in security, medical, and parking.
So let's back up a little bit. Do you get much, or have you had much in the way of conversations with churches that may not have the necessary manpower to do what you're suggesting?
Yes, I have, and a lot of the nursing and a lot of the medical teams that I develop, I'll go to a church and they'll say, we have Aunt Betty who sits in the second to the last row on the left. We know she retired as a nurse. We'll just call on her. Well, what if Aunt Betty's not there? Or heaven forbid, what if Aunt Betty is the patient? You should have somebody who is scheduled and on a rotation to work those shifts. And it's surprising, you can find in almost any group over 20 people, somebody who has had either a medical training of some type, even if it's just a Boy Scout leader who has had basic first aid. And then you can always find somebody who has either worked as a fireman or a nurse or a nursing assistant or a children's pediatrician's office assistant, but they have the basic first aid, they have CPR, they have the basics to start with. I had a team at one point that was consisted of a cardiothoracic surgeon was on duty one day, and a orthopedic surgeon was on same day at this next service, and I teamed them up with a gentleman who was actually a dive master. Now, my right hand man at the church when I was employed there was actually this gentleman who was a dive master, and he was if it was really going down, I would take that dive master with basic first aid training over a cardiothoracic surgeon or a neurosurgeon any day, because he knew the hands-on. He knew when it got crazy how to respond. Whereas the neurosurgeon and the cardiothoracic surgeon was more like, we bark orders, somebody else does them. So not necessarily having a doctor on the medical team is nice to have a few if you can, but you want to pair them with somebody who is a little less in the management position that can actually put boots on the ground.
Have you ever run into, because this came up as an issue within our church, within our state, in some aspects. So much like we've had several law enforcement individuals on our security team that have had to step down because of the current culture in our society, and it puts their liability back on, at least in our state, the liability's back on their shoulders. If something were to happen at the church and they were to respond, they were to get hurt, they were to get sued for one reason. Well, we know, getting sued's a given.
Yeah.
Then the liability falls directly on them, and it's not worth it to take the risk. The other issue we've had with law enforcement is that their department won't let them serve at the church in that capacity, so it doesn't put the department in liability. Well, the same thing happened on the medical side with us. We did have a nurse. It was a husband and wife team. He was a doctor, she was a nurse, and she had been his nurse forever, and literally. And so we were fortunate to have them, but they even had to step back from officially being part of any kind of medical team for liability reasons. And that's at least here, but I'm not sure what that looks like everywhere else for everyone else. But is that something that you've had to address?
Yeah, I'm currently in the state of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has the Good Samaritan Act, and that will completely cover you 100% if you're providing care up to and including anything that you have been trained in. So I, as a registered nurse, I could go in and treat a patient, but I could not, if I thought, hey, they're having headaches, I think I should get a drill out and do burr holes into their brain. Yeah,
Relief pressure.
Good Samaritan Act is not going to cover that. But if I am splinting an arm, if I am getting vital signs and preparing this patient for transport in the ambulance, when the ambulance comes, that's all covered under Good Samaritan Act 100%. Now, I did have a gentleman who was a dentist who wanted really, really bad to join the team, actually joined the team. And after about 3 weeks, he came to me and said, Terry, I'm sorry, I have to resign. And I was shocked. I said, well, you're really excited about this. He said, yes, my insurance agent said, if I join this team, he will drop me for insurance. And I was totally blown away by that. But that was just an individual that their insurance company, for whatever reason, responded in a way I would never expect. And I've never seen that I've developed medical teams now in a couple hundred churches, and I've never seen that other than that one incident. As far as law enforcement goes, I'm a 100% backer of the blue. But I would honestly say, sorry guys, the best church security are not police officers. I know I'm going to probably get some emails about that, but police officers, oftentimes when they come to church and they first and foremost say, I'm not a cop when I'm at church. Many cops, which I can say at least over 50% that I have talked to, do not even carry in church. And that blew my mind. I was very surprised by that statement. And nowadays with the unrest, I'm sure that's probably even increasing, as you mentioned. But I've never had a police officer say that their department did not permit them to join the team. And all the security teams I've worked with and all the churches I've worked with, I've never heard that once. Maybe Pennsylvania is just a lot better when it comes to that. And honestly, since COVID started and the civil arrest has increased, I haven't been working as much with churches because of obviously the COVID lockdown. So I don't know if that's going to change. I'll keep you updated and I'll let you know.
We just want to take a quick break here to let you know how to contact us and where to find out more about our national seminar. I see communities that may know why church security is important, but they may not be doing anything about it or don't know how to do it well. Our national seminars are for ushers, greeters, children's workers, staff, volunteers, your security teams, and other ministries in your community. We say that this is a level 1 training that is designed to help equip you to serve well in your various ministries while maintaining a safe place for people to come. Getting churches on the same or similar page when it comes to security will only make the community safer as well. The easiest way to find out more information or to contact us is to go to cv-ministries.com. There you'll find a variety of training DVDs and books, with more being developed all the time. There's also a place at the bottom of the page where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and to be able to get more information. We would love your feedback on topics or guests that you would like to hear on future podcasts. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, I think, for many of the officers, so a couple things on that. The officers that we've had serve on our teams have been great. And I talk about this often. I've done podcasts with officers that they recognize too that just because they may be a police officer or were or have whatever that looks like, that they may not be the right individual for leading a ministry in regards to security, because it is totally different. But they do make awesome trainers in many cases.
Oh, yeah.
And having them as a resource in a responding manner is huge. A lot of ours will say, yeah, here's where, we're here today. If you need us, let us know. Here's where we're sitting, that kind of thing. We know who they are in our congregation because we have a great relationship with them. And in that. So, I get that. The Good Samaritan law, yeah, I think what it has come down to for the medical and for the police is either they, ask forgiveness thing, don't ask for permission, ask for, forgiveness. Yeah, that type of mentality, but that has been less of the mentality to where they have to start checking with their anything off duty wise that they're doing that could be brought back to the department. They have to be more careful about, and we're seeing the same thing with the medical end of things. Yeah, it is that insurance piece. You may have only seen one, but how many of the others are even checking with their insurance? And that individual probably, I don't know that every physician carries their own liability insurance on their own. Somebody working for a hospital.
I think they have to.
Do you? Yeah. And so it's just something I don't know whether the hospital covers it for them or if they were out on their own, they'd have to have it their own. I don't know what that, and maybe that dentist had to have his own, but I know that was part of the issue with many of the. Now we do have medical individuals. If we have a medical emergency, they come out of the woodwork at our church. We had a guy have a heart attack. This doctor and I'm really careful. You may have heard on a previous podcast, if I've even talked about it, I'm really careful to ask what kind of a doctor are they. We got burned really bad with a guy saying, "Yeah, I'm a doctor. I can help here." Well, he was a psychologist with no medical training.
I think it's like a physical company.
Yeah, and he had actually even lost his license to practice psychology. We later found out, but that's a whole nother story in that. But that kind of taught us, it was one of those incidents that we learned from to say, okay, what kind of doctor are you? And fortunately, this guy, he and I lifted this older gentleman out of the pew, put him in the aisle, and started to get his heart going again. But he was, and then we had a couple nurses come out of the woodwork too, which was awesome in that. And unfortunately, and I had one get really mad at me, but we first security guy on scene controls the scene, and we had enough nurses and another nurse comes up and says, I'm a nurse. I said, well, thank you. We have 3 other nurses and this doctor here right now helping out. We don't need any more at this time. Holy cow, was she offended and was angry. at that. But yet, we you can't have we can't have chaos and too many people leading the train there.
I had a situation one time where a woman got up and said, "I'm a nurse. I'm taking charge." And our medical team, who are uniformed with lanyards, photo IDs, responded and got there and asked this woman to step aside. And she said, "No, I'm a nurse. I got this." And our security thankfully stepped in, kind of tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Ma'am, we have a skilled, trained medical team here. Please step aside." And she was once again also very offended. But I said, "Ma'am, if you'd like to join the medical team, I can have a meeting with you and we can go through an interview process and we'll be happy to get you on the team. But until then, we have to," and it's funny because she kept saying, "I'm a nurse, I'm a nurse." And this gentleman was having a cardiac situation. And now a cardiothoracic surgeon was on duty. And he shows up with a red shirt with a little snake on a stick, the caduceus, and the church's name on his show on the over the right chest. And other person on that team at the time was an emergency room nurse. So she had this gentleman who had gone down, had an ER nurse and a cardiothoracic surgeon. I can't think of a better team that you would want on a cardiac call than that. And this woman still kept saying, "But I'm a nurse. I want to take charge." And I'm like, "No, please step aside."
Yeah.
And there are times where you have to physically say, "All right, you're done."
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then back to the other aspect, and I keep thinking of our church is a large church, so we have a lot of resources, a lot of personnel that we can do a lot of different things with. And I think of the churches that are, the majority of the churches in America are your small to mid sized churches. They're not the large churches,
Two,
and
300 people, I think, is standard.
yeah, pretty much. To where they need to. This is where that total team concept comes into play. That if there's an emergency, those ushers, those greeters, those staff members, whatever the case is, need to step up. But there's nothing wrong with pointing to somebody and deputizing them and say, "Hey, I need this hallway blocked off. Don't let anybody down here while we're attending to this individual." People are more than willing usually to jump in where, there's always people, "Hey, how can I help?" Great. I need you to call 911 and I need you to stand right here next to me as I relay information to you. Whatever the case is. I mean, deputizing individuals to fill those gaps, it can be huge. Or I need you out in the parking lot and I need you to direct EMS
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
right
right.
doors and so on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like I said, though, even if a church has 200 people, you would be surprised. And some of the best people on the medical team, I used to, you always try to have one, for the lack of better terms, higher skilled person on the team. But the person who is backing them up, I jokingly used to say, any mom who has gotten their child to the 18th birthday alive can serve on the medical team because they've already patched up everything you can think of and taken care of the majority of things you're going to be taken care of in church. 98% of the things are coming out of that we talked about earlier boo boo box. And those are the ladies and the gentlemen who have raised kids that are the perfect person for the medical team. Uh, they don't have to be licensed professionals. And once again, I'm not knocking police officers. I think police officers are awesome on the team. I just don't think it should be all police officers, or a lot of times police officers in a leadership position have a tendency to try running the security team as a police officer or as a police team. And that's not what you want. The security team in church is first and foremost a ministry. We are there to get people the help they need and direct them to the people that they need to see, not to, prevent them from worshiping. Some of the people who need to hear the gospel the most are those people who you would think, why would you invite them into your church? Uh, there's the gentleman that I actually partnered with my consulting company. He used to say, he was a chief of police, and he told me one time, uh, the people that you invite into your church are the people that I get paid to throw out of places.
Right.
And that's exactly it. These are people who are hurting and people who may have issues, and those are the people that God has called us to minister to. And the other issue with the security team specifically, I'm a big proponent on the security team having some type of uniform shirt, whether it be just a polo shirt with the a small word security, church security, or the name of the church, or there's a billion and one different names. You can call them the shepherds, the sheepdogs, the gatekeepers. I mean, there's all these different cute little names you can go with as well. But security is basic and the most understandable. But I found that after many years of doing this, the people who hate the security most are actually the maintenance workers, because security are the ones that are out there in the lobby patrolling, and it's those people who people are coming up to them and saying, "Hey, the second stall in the bathroom won't flush or is backed up, or hey, room 123 is cold, can you turn the thermostat up?" And we would say, well, we're not maintenance, but we will contact them. And we had a 16 channel radio that on one channel one was security and medical, and on channel 16 was maintenance. So no matter which way you turned that dial, if you got to the end, you got somebody. And medical and security was on one. We would just flip over to 16 and call maintenance and say, hey, toilet in room in the bathroom install 2 is plugged, or this room needs the thermostat turned up. Can you take care of that? So we actually got to the point where every time you'd switch over to 16 and say maintenance, this is security, they'd say, what now? So, but what a great opportunity. People were coming to the security team because they needed help, whether that was their kids lost, they can't find their car battery's dead, or the toilet's overflowing. They came to somebody and they got help. And that's what ministry is all about, helping people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the church is there for the hurting and the broken, and this is where I talk about that the security team needs to be that outside, needs to be observing who does need that help while they're out and about. The something to that. So I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench into what you just said to a little bit. Something that we have to be careful of, particularly in certain counties here in Colorado. The county I'm in, we cannot put anything on us that identifies us as security. If we do, then we have to go get a state license
All right. That's familiar
on
also with
that.
Texas, I understand.
Yeah, yeah, I know there's different parts of the country that are that way. Ohio's got some really funny laws about even anybody serving on their security team. Ours, we've had a security team for about 13 years now. Right after the New Life shooting, there's two big churches in town, a New Life church and then our church, and we stood up a security team right after the New Life shooting, and it was pretty small, and but that's when we really got going. But in the 13 years that we've done it, we don't wear a uniform. We do have a pigtail, into our ear. We do have a 16 channel radio that we utilize on a repeater and so on. People recognize the pigtail, but all of our ushers have them. Children's workers have them. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all on their own channels. If we have parking on the holidays, then they have them. So it's people who just kind of know. But I really count on our security team recognizing people that might be looking lost and so on as well. Keeping cognito, let's say, for lack of a better term, has seemed to work really well for us to be able to respond to situations, and it kind of de-escalates it right from the start.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
In many ways. My son started a new job, and he was talking to his coworker, and the coworker said, well, so what did you do this weekend? Well, I went out, shot 200 rounds with our security team, did some, move and shoot training stuff out at the range. And he's like, well, that's great. He said, I think my church could use a security team. And my son says, well, what church do you go to? And so he gives the name. He says, that is my church. He says, we have a 70-man security team. And he's like,
Wow.
I didn't even know that. That what campus do you go to? I go to such and such campus, and my son said, "Well, then I guess we're doing our job well."
Yeah.
Because if the service can go on, ministry can go on, and we can stand on the wall without drawing attention to ourselves, but continue to minister to people, I think that's a win-win in it. And that's the way my son approached it with this guy too. Was like, well, then I guess we're doing our job well because we have security at every campus.
I agree with that. There's two sides to that coin. I'm on I think the odd side. A lot of people go exactly with that undercover concept. I like the visible deterrent aspect of having a security team. If someone's going to come in, they're going to see somebody in the lobby, hopefully in the lobby, with a shirt on that says security. And in Pittsburgh, in southwestern Pennsylvania, there's quite a few churches. From the church that I was employed at, you could get to probably 8 different churches within a 5-minute walk. And at that point, it was great to know that if somebody came into into the lobby and saw somebody with a church security shirt on, they would go, you know what? I was going to do something, but you know what? I think I'm going to go across the street and take care of my dirty deeds over there, because they don't have anybody, or at least they can't see anybody. So there is a big visible deterrent there. I also,
Okay,
like I
so
said,
let's
especially for oh,
let's look at it
go
from a
ahead.
different perspective a little bit. Too. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and it could go either way. I'm not
Yeah,
saying one way's
I'm
right
not
or the
saying one
other.
way is better than the other.
Yeah, yeah, but I can also see it from the standpoint of like Colonel Grossman talks about the open carry individual when we're out traveling and doing seminars. He talks about that individual that is the open carry individual. He considers them his decoy. Because if somebody's really
Yes.
wanting to do harm, that's who they're going to take out the individual that poses the greatest threat to them first. I kind of look at the security team identifying themselves in that manner. Yes, I can see it as a deterrent. We do hire law enforcement for our campuses, and we look at them as that deterrent also. And not every church can do that, but but I don't know that putting on I'm going to use the term uniform. I know that's not correct, but whatever that might
Yeah,
look like, whether it's
I don't want to.
something that identifies them in some way as security, readily identifies them as security, could potentially create that same effect as if somebody's open carrying, to where, okay, that's they've come, they've checked out the church. Now I know who I need to take out first if I'm going to cause the greatest harm with the least amount of resistance in
And I
it.
realized that to be a potential hazard there. Up until last shooting in Texas, and it's a shame that we actually have to say the last shooting in Texas. That means there's been more than one, but there's never been a situation where a gunman or an intruder or an active intruder came in and took out a identified security team person first. And even in the shooting in Texas, I'm not sure the gentleman that he did take out that was sitting down in the pew. He was there to monitor him. I'm not sure if he was an active security member or not. So
He was an active
yeah,
security member in that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's, there's no perfect answer in it.
yeah.
And in however we do this, it comes back to, where we started today is that there needs to be that total team concept, that there needs to be the different ministries working together, having those medical individuals identified and developing them into a team is great. If that's what your church decides to do in but having the necessary resources and personnel is vital to the security of the church, and knowing who they are and not just assuming that, well, it's not going to happen here.
Well,
And
that's
it may
a
not.
concept that is not just dangerous, but it's also prevalent. And I know I'm going to knock my hometown area here in the Northeast United States. Um, all the training I've ever received has been out west, south, Florida, Texas, Colorado, Kansas City. I've gone all these places. there's not a whole lot in the Northeast United States for training. It's difficult to have training when there's no one there to train. So that's really why God called me out and said, "You've done a great job there. Now go teach other places as a consultant." And oh, believe me, I fought that like the Dickens. I did not want to go. I was quite comfortable and happy where I was. I had 175 volunteers under me. I did everything from security church, security concerts. We brought in some great big names for concerts. Did all that and had a wonderful time. But God said, "Okay, go now, spread your wings and go and do my work." And it's funny when you don't do what God wants you to do, He will eventually drop you, take your legs out from underneath you and cause you to go where He wants you to go. I had a little Jonah moment kind of thing there. But once again, you were talking about how the teams work together. The biggest situations like that is to make sure your medical team is on radio, your parking team is on radio, and obviously your security team is on radio. Because if there's a missing child, that's another one it's a great one. When there's a missing child, not just security gets up, parking comes, starts looking on the outside, medical team starts actively searching in the building as well. The ushers on radios, they start looking in the worship service. So everybody jumps into to duty. And same thing with fire alarms and all those type of things that you need all hands on deck. And what's also nice is if you have medical team in the worship service or in the nursery or whatever, you now have another set of eyes to contact security if something does not look. And they're all taught situational awareness. They're all taught what to look for. The infamous Strategos JDLRs, just don't look right. One of the biggest things I teach when I go into churches is four simple words. When somebody's coming in the building and either you don't know them or you just have that what do you know, Spider-Man, spider sense, however you want to call it. Whenever you just don't feel comfortable, you ask four individual words that just solves everything. May I help you? And it does two things. One, if they are indeed lost and they're looking around because they're confused, yes, you may. Can you tell me where the children's ministry is? Or yes, you may. Where's the coffee? Where's the bathroom? You can find and help them, and once again, minister to them. But the other aspect of that is this other side of that coin is if they are there to do wrong, to do evil, cause a problem, they now know you have addressed them. You see them, you recognize them, you've seen their face, you know their voice, you know exactly what they're up to if they do try to do something. And that's once again why I'm going to jump on the uniform concept. They know now somebody from security has seen them, and at that point you've got a radio in your ear, and all you have to do is say, "Hey, I got a guy that just doesn't seem right. He's going into the stage left door of the worship center. Can we keep an eye on him?" And the other thing with security is you always want to have, we refer to them as hot seats, a seat on the left and a seat in the front, a seat in the left front and a seat in the right front. You have security touch base with production staff to find out what they're doing that day. If there's anything unusual. A great story I love to tell was the pastor was speaking about a missions team. And as he said, we have missions team in Cleveland. so as he said that, a man and a woman stood up and started walking down the center aisle. And security on the left goes, "We have people coming up the center aisle. Any ideas?" Guy on the right said, "No, I have no idea." They immediately both stood up and started to crisscross in front of the stage. At which point, the pastor finished by saying, "And these are our missionaries from Cleveland coming up to the stage." At which point, I have to give these guys total kudos. They stopped and they held the arms of both the man and the woman and helped them up the steps as if that's why they got up. They
Right.
helped them up the steps and then they peeled off and went back to their seats. And it was one of those things that it could have been something else. and they responded appropriately. They did what they were trained to do, and thankfully, it was absolutely nothing, and we all got a good chuckle out of it afterwards. But it was just an ultimate example of what happens. Don't just sit there and let somebody walk up on stage. So those are the one of those moments that actually really make the day. We've had days where we've had 2 medical calls, a lost child, and a car break-in on the same Sunday. And those are the extreme days that are rare, thankfully. But those are the days where your teams really do their job. And I'm a firm believer in having at least a 4 or 5 man team with a team lead every Sunday. And if your church has 2 services, the first service you will go and spend time with your family worshiping. You can wear an earpiece because you can be another set of eyes while you're in there. That's not a question. That's greatly appreciated. But during the second service, then you serve on the security team. So make sure your people who are working security are fed. And that's one of the biggest problems you're having with those 200 member churches. There's one guy that does security. He does it every Sunday. He hasn't heard a sermon. He hasn't been through a Sunday school in how many years? And that's the worst thing you can do to have a security on a security team, is to not be feeding your personnel.
Well, Terry, I appreciate you taking your time today and coming on and talking about this concept of combining these different teams, of developing these different teams within the churches, and the importance of that. It's something that can never be talked about enough, I don't think, because it's not on the forefront of many churches. They've got other things on their mind, and yet it is another ministry nowadays, like any other ministry within the church, and needs to develop the same way. So I appreciate your time today.
All right, no problem. I greatly appreciate the time to spend together, and look forward to hearing from you some more on the podcast. It's a great podcast. Can't speak highly enough of it. And like I said, the fact that you got Carl Chin there and those guys to touch base with, I envy you. I really do. I'm quite jealous.
All right. Well, thanks. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to this podcast. If you really enjoyed it and you found it of benefit to you, we really appreciate your feedback. There's several different ways that you can provide us feedback. One of them is to subscribe to the podcast, is to share it with others, and another is to contact us directly, particularly if you have any questions or concerns, or you want more information on how to host a seminar in your community. You can contact me directly at danielblevins@cv@heart.com, or you can go to our website. That's cv-ministries.com. Both of those will get you in the right direction. Until next time, make sure that you're out there protecting the flock with a heart of service.